As some of you saw last week, I gave a speech for our guests on homelessness in Chicago. How to me it's gotten worse, and mostly it's a lot of the people are mentally ill and have problems such as that, but I wrapped it in homelessness. But after the speech, I thought I had done a wonderful job, and I think our guests liked it too, but they also had a lot of questions. Billionaire Ken Brzezinski said, "You're going to raise my taxes." I talked about raising taxes on wealthy people. David said, "Great speech, but if it really doesn't affect me, why should I care?" And Pat, who's not here, she said, "John, it was a good speech, but I would have liked to have seen you do a little more research and stuff like this." So friends, this week, I'm going to give a similar speech, but I'm going to address some of these important questions. Since David is laughing, we're going to start with David. I don't remember his exact words, but like I said, they were like, well, why should I really care about homelessness if it doesn't affect me? So another thing I had left out in my previous speech about homelessness is one thing I noticed about a month ago. I live in River North. I was walking home from the Jewel, and you never see homeless people there, but there's a few bridges nearby, and I was walking home a month ago, and sure enough, there was a homeless guy, not next to my building, but maybe a block away next to someone else's building, and there was a middle-aged couple in front of me, and they were walking ahead, and I saw them see this homeless guy, and I could tell they were thinking, I could see the lady's expression. They're like, I'm sure they felt sorry for this man, but they're also like, wow, there's a homeless guy, right? I could tell they were just annoyed that the homelessness was almost at their front door. So the fact is, even though it doesn't affect you now, they may end up at your front door next week. And another reason is, you may not think it affects you, but it's just, as I said in my previous speech, it's a cost matter. If 30% of the people in Cook County Jail are mentally ill, and it costs, say, $40,000 to house most of these people, I can't do a cost analysis of what it would cost, but I'm sure if you had the proper doctors and the social service clinics that they closed, had places for these ill people to go, get their prescriptions, I'm sure you could probably do it for about half that money. So here it would improve the situation for everyone, and it would just cost less money. Now, as far as our billionaire, Ken Brzezinski, he said, "You're going to raise my taxes." He's not really a billionaire, but he kind of said...
I'm working.
But basically he was implying, sure, they always say we're going to raise them the rich, but actually they raise taxes on everyone. And he's partially right, but let me just start with a few facts. When I said billionaires, I really meant raise taxes on very wealthy people. And let me just give you a few examples of why it's really not done unfair to Ken. Now, many people think in Chicago our taxes are very high, and sometimes they are. But the fact is, first of all, also, let me just step back a bit. This country was built on progressive income tax. Since the mid-1800s, rich people always pay more. We don't want rich people dying, leaving their money to the kids, and then we're going to have these royalty at the top, because that's what it's going to end up. We kind of want a society where it's a bit more equal, to a certain extent. But if you look at California, the top tax rate for the state of California is 13%, I believe. I might be off 1 or 2%. In New York, it's 10%. Illinois, it's 5%. So whether you make whatever, a few $100,000 or billions, the top rate in Illinois is only 5%. And when I was talking about raising taxes, I said 0.5%. Now, another thing we should keep in mind is in the last 8 years since the last financial crash, who has gotten the most wealth? It's the billionaires, the people that own office buildings and apartment buildings, have huge stock portfolios. Their wealth has increased more than ever before. And also the division between the very rich and the very poor is the largest it's ever been in the history of this country since the Great Depression. So these are some reasons. And when I say raise taxes on wealthy, I mean possibly 0.5%. It's really not that much. And as far as Pat, she asked me to do a little bit of research. So I spent 5 minutes researching. And some of the things I said, just to show you I'm sheltered too, even though I noticed this homelessness, is that I had said I saw people living in tents on the Chicago River. I was like, wow, But actually I read an article just a week ago that there's a whole community of homeless people that live in tents on these bridges like Bryn Mawr and Foster along the Lakeshore Drive. I didn't even realize it. I was like, wow. But what I also read was because the bridge is crumbling, they want to redo this bridge, but homeless people have rights too. They have lawyers, they have different groups that stick up for homeless people, and actually these people were complaining, how can you fix this bridge and kick out these homeless people? Dad, they got nowhere to go. That's not fair. And another thing they were going to do is once they fixed the bridge, they were going to put a bike lane so the homeless people couldn't come back. And they're saying that's not fair. And maybe it's not fair, I don't know. But the fact is, I did research that. And another thing I found, actually Chicago, even though they've closed a lot of their mental illness places, and the state of Illinois has cut down on social services spending, Chicago did have a pilot program, I believe about 10 years ago, where they tracked about 50 homeless people, kind of in the same area, on the north side by Lakeshore. I don't know if they were living in tents 10 years ago, but there were a bunch of homeless people. And in a pilot program, they did track about 70 of these people, and they placed them in homes, and a year later, they found that most of them were still in these homes. But the problem is, it was a pilot program. They never really followed through with this pilot program. They didn't expand it to the whole city. So, although it maybe helped those few people, it really didn't do that much for the whole city. So, in closing, friends, and just one more story. I remember when I was little, and this is true. I grew up in the suburbs. My dad, we were middle class, but every once in a while my family would have money. We'd come down to see a show or a movie or get pan pizza or something like this. And ever since I was little, I remember, I would see homeless people. Even back then we had them. And I always remember when I got home, I was like, wow, it's so sad to see these people, you know. And what does a little kid know? He doesn't know anything. But I was thinking, who are these people? Do they have a mother and a father like me? Where do they go eat? Does someone bring them food? How did they end up there? And it's something I haven't forgotten. And think about all the little kids. This sounds like a sad story, but all the little kids that see them today. What about all the tourists that come by and see these homeless people? So in the end, the reason really why we should care is, even if we don't think it affects us in a lot of different ways, maybe, that we don't understand. So hopefully, I've addressed some of your questions from my previous speech, and together we can make this situation work for all of us. Thank you.
All right.